Assalamu alaikum, everyone. A very good morning to a very good evening to all of you. I hope that you're in the best of your health. Can everybody hear me? I have been given the opportunity to moderate today's webinar. It is organized by Giving Back to Pharmacy in Pakistan, an organization whose vision is to empower pharmacists for a better healthcare. They say that curiosity is the biggest drive to medical breakthroughs and research. However, getting your research published is the tricky part, and a milestone that needs to be achieved to rightly utilize your hard work put into research. Today, we are pleased to welcome Dr. Zahiruddin Babar, a very special guest from the United Kingdom. Dr. Babar is a director, Center for Pharmaceutical Policy and Practice Research, professor in Medical and Healthcare, University of Huddersfield, United Kingdom, editor-in-chief of Journal of Pharmaceutical Policy and Practice. He has also been a consultant on pharmaceutical pricing, World Bank Group. He has also been a dean and professor in Lahore Pharmacy College. And here I would like to mention that I've had the privilege to be his student. What an extraordinary man. The vision that he holds for his students is commendable. He has always encouraged us to utilize our skills to put them into use. He was the first one to generate the idea of launching our college's first magazine and chose me as the editor-in-chief. It was such a big success, alhamdulillah. And what's even more commendable is that there were several more editions that followed. Dr. Babar will be sharing his expert opinion on the topic publishing your scientific and medical research. We are sure that the audience will have questions to ask. I would request you to please type your questions on the Zoom chat box. You can also type your comments on the YouTube's comment section. We're also live on YouTube. Mr. Tahir Shah, my co-host, and I will conduct a question answer session for 10 to 15 minutes by the end of the webinar. With that, I would request that you give your full attention to Dr. Zahiruddin Babar and help me in welcoming him. Dr. Babar.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Amal, for the kind introduction. Can you hear me properly?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will be sharing my screen so you people can see that what I'm going to present today. Can you see the presentation? Can you see that what I put it in? Can you see my presentation? Anybody can just reply me?
Not yet.
Can you see it now? No? Yes? Is there any way to project the screen? Because I'm trying to actually I'm just pressing the button to show the screen, but I'm not sure what is happening on my computer.
Okay, let me check.
Hello.
Tanisha, can you go ahead and display the slides I shared with you if you can?
Yes, sir.
So should I just go ahead and talk about it? I mean, I'm just pressing the button. I have the slides. I'm trying to share the screen, but I don't know.
So Dr. Babar, until it comes up, so please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you so much for actually giving me the opportunity to talk about publishing scientific research. I've been involved in this for quite a while in publishing research. So I can see that actually you have managed to show, so the people can see the slides now.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I think I will just say slide 1, and then you can perhaps move the slides. So I'm going to on my video as well so that you can see me on the screen too, basically. So what I'm going to do today is to give you an idea about types of scientific literature, types of papers published in scientific and medical journals, what to look for when actually you're selecting a journal, what journal editors are looking for, submitting papers, writing rebuttals, and how many papers you should publish actually from your research, even if you're doing a master's or you're doing a PhD, so it will give you an idea. The next slide, please. So you have basically you have two types of literature. One is the primary literature, which is the general research articles you have, in which you produce original research. And the second one is the secondary literature or tertiary literature, which we use to produce books. So I hope that people do understand between the original research articles as well as with the review articles. Or so systematic reviews, Cochrane reviews, meta-analysis, and all these are basically types of secondary research. So when we talk about book chapters, then most of the time we do write book chapters based on secondary literature or tertiary literature. So sometimes we do write book chapters based on primary resources, but most of the time it's on secondary literature. Next, please. So the types of papers you have are, you have different types of papers when you actually want to submit to a journal, and they range from, there are different types, and if you're not a researcher, then you don't really understand which one is what. But you have editorials, you have review articles, you have original articles, you have viewpoints and commentaries, letter to editor, book reviews, clinical case studies, journal supplement, and commission editorials and things. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that actually to explain, because not everything what comes in a scientific journal is a original research article. So there could be different categories. For example, if I'm the editor of a journal, then sometime I do write my own editorials, or sometime I ask other people. So I invite researchers actually to write an editorial on a specific topic and give their opinion on an issue. So editorials are mostly in the range of about 1,000 to 1,200 words. So these are specific, concise things on a topic. And these are editorial, but they do have references at the end. So you do write editorials, but then you basically build your argument on the basis of the references and support it with the references as well. Review articles are basically reviews. It could be systematic reviews, or it could be narrative reviews. It could be simple reviews. There are different types of review articles. So, and even you may have heard about Cochrane reviews as well. So they're also type of review articles. So review articles, basically, we review the literature on a topic, and then we present our synthesis and findings. So for example, you can have thousands of papers, you can review thousands of papers on a specific issue. For example, consumer perception of generic medicines, or pharmacist perception of generic medicines, a global literature. So these could be, reviews, or the pharmacist experiences with the weight management all around the globe. And then you can search that what is being done all over the world. So the published literature, you synthesize published literature and then submit. Original articles are the most commonly known articles in the category, which we know because it's based on original research. So it's an original type of research in which you have introduction, methods, results, discussion, and conclusion. Viewpoints and commentaries are also your opinion on something. And again, these viewpoints and commentaries, it differs from one journal to another journal. but mostly they're in the range of about 1,500 to 3,000 words, whereas original research articles are mostly in the range of 5,000 to 6,000 words. Review articles are also in the 5,000 to 6,000 words. So viewpoints and commentaries are very similar to each other, and they basically emphasize on a certain topic and they talk about. But then again, you have to have references and resources. There is a misconception that many people think that they can just build a viewpoint and commentary based on your opinion. You can build that, but it's also as important to have references at the end, and you do support your argument with the references. Letter to editors again are short pieces. They're about 500 to 800 words, so very short pieces. And again, they are emphasizing on a certain issue. Easier to publish comparatively, but they are you do support them with references. You can also write book reviews, and these book reviews are published on a book. So these could be commissioned, these could be non-commissioned. You can actually, commission means that you can, sometime the editors could approach somebody and can say, can you do a book review on this? Or can you write an editorial on that? Or can you write a commentary on that? So these are commissioned reviews or commissioned editorial or commissioned book reviews. Non-commissioned mean that actually you do approach the editor and say that you're interested to do a book review on a book. Are you interested to publish? And the editor would say, yes, we are keen or we are not keen. And then perhaps you can write the book review and then submit it to them for their consideration, and then they can decide. So they can go through or not. Another thing which I want to mention, that many of these three things, different journals have different policies, but most of the time, if you are submitting an editorial or submitting a commentary or a letter to editor or a book review, these do not have to go through a peer review process. I hope that people here understand what is a peer review process, that as a journal editor, when I receive an article, then I have to send it to the reviewers so that they can, reviewers then give their opinion whether article could be accepted for publication, it could be rejected, or it needs some sort of revisions. But if you're submitting an editorial, if you're submitting a viewpoint, if you're submitting a commentary, letter to editor, or a book review, then of course they don't have to go through a peer review process, basically. But if you are submitting a review article or a research article, most of the time it has to go through a stringent peer review process before an article could be accepted or rejected. Some journals, which are mostly clinical journals, very heavily clinical journals, they do have clinical case studies as well. And again, these are short case studies on maybe a drug-induced phenomena or a disease-specific phenomena. And then again, they're very short pieces of about maybe 1,000 words. And many journals, they don't have to go through peer review process. Journal supplements is another category in which you publish conference presentations and conference supplements. And again, they are commissioned. So sometime in my journal as well, we are contacted by the different conferences that they would like to publish a journal supplement with us. But we only supplement we only publish when we see that actually this fits within the scope of our journal. And then we actually peer review, we go through the abstracts, whatever the abstracts are submitted, and then we would publish those. But one other thing which you need to understand, that the supplements, journal supplements, the articles which are published in journal supplements are mostly abstracts. They're not full papers. So you should not confuse them with the full text article. So if somebody is telling you that he has got a paper, so paper means that he has got a full length research article, not an abstract, which is published as a journal supplement. Not to say that they are not important, but you cannot substitute a journal supplement with an abstract with the full article. Commissioned editorial, as I've explained earlier, that these are the editorials in which somebody would commission, the editor would commission you to write something, basically. So it's coming from the journal itself, not coming from you. And interestingly, some journals, a very small number of journals, they even sometimes pay to the authors to write those editorials as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so coming to the point that what to look for when selecting a journal to publish your paper. And I mean, journal publishing and writing is totally a different skill from what you would have as a practicing pharmacist. I've worked in a number of countries, and my experience working in all over the world is that you could be a fantastic hospital pharmacist or a community pharmacist, but it doesn't mean that you could be good in publishing as well. And the reason behind, because you're not trained to do so. So the skill set you have in terms of publishing or writing and editing is a different skill set if you actually practice as a pharmacist. So it doesn't matter where you are trained, whether you are trained in London or whether you're trained in New Zealand or whether you're trained in Malaysia or any parts of the world, your skills as a pharmacist to write are not up to that level where you are trained as a professional, because pharmacists are mostly trained to be a healthcare professional as a practitioner to actually promote health promotion. They are not trained to publish papers. So publishing and writing is a skill which people acquire as they do their master's and PhD, or if they have a role description in which they have to publish something, then this is something which they acquire over the years. So that's why it's important that people have this sort of mentoring and support when they want to publish, because publishing is a long process. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, and it's a lengthy patient process. So you can't think that overnight you can turn something excellent or something very good. It comes with the years of experience. Some people get it very fast. Some takes a little bit longer time actually to get a better understanding of publishing. But it's like a skill, like any other skill. Whether you drive a car or you fly an aeroplane, it's a skill. So the same way, the writing and editing and publishing is basically a skill set which you need to acquire over time. So what to look for when selecting a journal to publish your paper? Next slide. So if you are, regardless of if you're a master's student, if you're a PhD student, if you're a hospital pharmacist, if you're a new researcher, or if you're a senior academic, you're a hospital administrator, whatever your position is, if you have written a paper, or if you're planning to write a paper, then these are the things which you need to look for when you actually select a journal, basically. So the scope of the journal's aims and objectives, whether what you are submitting is actually falls into the scope of the journal, or is it talking about something else and you are actually submitting a paper of different nature. So most of the time, if you do not follow the scope of the journal, the article wouldn't even go through the peer review process. It would be rejected before than that. Another thing which you need to think about is the journal audience and reach. So as a pharmacist, sometimes we actually publish our papers in medical journals and sometimes in pharmacy journals. So general medical journals, for example, Lancet, PLOS Medicine, New England Journal of Medicine, they have a broader reach. They have a broader coverage. Whereas if you talk about pharmacy journal, they're more focused, they're more specific. Not to say that these are not important, but actually it depends on your article where you want to actually portray your article. Some brilliant articles are published in journals which are published in the countries. For example, they're not global journals, but they are published by the societies or the local journals published by the countries itself, which is equally good as well. Another thing which you need to look at is the electronic submission systems. Nowadays, it's becoming very difficult and challenging because there are a lot of requirements which you need to go through. If you're submitting a paper to BMJ, then you have to, of course, look at different forms. You have to look at ethics declaration. You have to look at funding statements. And again, if you're publishing a review article, then the criteria is different and you have to fill in different sort of forms for review articles. And if you're publishing research articles, then the forms could be slightly different in that capacity. So whatever you have, the electronic submission systems, for the new researchers, my advice would be to actually take a couple of days to understand electronic submission system. How does it work, basically? So if you're an experienced researcher, then of course it could be easier. It could take you a couple of hours. But if you're a new researchers, it could take you 1 or 2 days to familiarize yourself with the system of the journal. Another thing which you want to look at is basically, is your journal indexed in Scopus, Medline, PubMed, or have an impact factor? Again, most of the time, people do tend to publish papers which are indexed in Scopus, because if the journal is not indexed in Scopus, the disadvantage could be that if your paper is cited somewhere, then of course the citations of that paper wouldn't appear in your profile. So nowadays we have author's profile on Scopus, as well as we have author profile on Google as well. But if the journal is not indexed in Scopus, then it wouldn't be part of your Scopus profile. So if, for example, 10 years later, if people want to see your research profile, then the articles you have published 10 years ago, they wouldn't appear in your Scopus profile, because those journals which you selected, they were not indexed in Scopus. Most of the reasonable good journals, they are now in Scopus and Medline and PubMed. And many of the journals, they have an impact factor as well. So we'll talk in a bit there what is an impact factor. Next, please. So before you do that, you need to think about that what are the journal editors they're looking for when publishing papers. So now you have decided actually you want to publish a paper, but you need to think about from the other side. So if I'm the editor, what I'm looking for, if somebody is actually submitting a paper to me. So the first thing which I'm looking at is basically originality of the research and topics. So I edit my own journal, which is Journal of Pharmaceutical Policy and Practice. And when somebody is actually submitting a paper to us, it gives us a sort of an idea of the originality index. So in the left-hand side of the bar, it shows me on the screen that actually how much of this is being copy-pasted from another article, or what are the other articles which are published in the field. So, but even if I don't look at bar, and as an experienced editor, I'm not talking about me, any experienced editor, within a couple of minutes, they will be able to analyze how important your article is in terms of what this adds to the existing knowledge or the body of literature. Or is it something, is a sort of a repetition, or is it something which is new in this context? So one thing which you want to take home a message from today's presentation is basically that what is new, what you are submitting to the journal. So it could be new in terms of the research question, or it could be new in terms of the methodology. So sometimes your research question could be the same, but the methods you have used actually to elucidate your data, or the methods you have used to analyze your data or to have that could be different. So you need to see whether your methods are new or your research question is new. So newness of the data is really important. Another thing which we look at, of course, how your results are presented, how whether the grammar is good, the structure is clear, your tables and figures, clarity in presentation, ethics, the work you have done, have you obtained ethics approval for that? Your references are good, or are they missing? So these are some of the important things which we actually look at when we are saying that whether this paper should go through the peer review process or it shouldn't go through the peer review process, basically. Another thing which we are interested, of course, is to look at the length of the paper. So if you're submitting a paper, we are saying to submit 5,000 words is a reasonable sort of length of a research article. But if somebody is sending me 10,000 words or 12,000 words, believe me, nobody is interested to read long papers. So it's always good to have shorter papers, shorter versions, 4,000 to 5,000 words for the research articles. And if you're writing commentaries or editorials, then of course it's 1,500 to 2,000 words. The shorter pieces you have in editorials and commentaries, that's much better than have the longer pieces. Okay, so if you're submitting original research articles, my advice wouldn't be go to more than 5,000 to 6,000, because nobody would be able to read what you are trying to say or to understand. So shorter pieces always tend to have the better sense. Next, please. So now is the time actually that to submit the paper to your journal. As I said, you need to understand you need to do a sort of a recce of the journal, see what sort of articles they are publishing, go through the website, look at the instruction for authors. The cover letter is another important, because many of the journals, like top journals, they wouldn't even entertain your article if you don't mention that why your study is important, because they get a lot of papers. So you need to clearly mention, just saying that it's important is not enough. So you need to clearly mention that why your study is important and what is add to the existing body of literature. Why an important journal, a top tier journal, should take heed of your findings, why they should consider. So it's always good to say upfront in a couple of paragraphs, maximum 2 paragraphs, state about why it's important, what is known about the, what is already known about this topic, and what this study adds to the existing literature. So this is really important. As I said, length of the article, keep it shorter, consistency in abbreviations, grammar, clarity, references. So these are the things which would, and try to write in a language which is not a very specialized language, because if you're sending to a top tier medical journal such as PLOS Medicine and Lancet, you don't want to write in language which only people in your field understand and nobody else understand. So you want to write in reasonable language which the other healthcare professionals can get an understanding of what you are trying to say. So these are kind of the tips I would advise you. In a nutshell, if you make it easy for the editor to read your paper, then of course he or she will be easy on you to actually go through the paper and have a peer review process. Next, please. So you have submitted the paper, and the paper has gone through the peer review process. And after peer review process, there were 2 or 3 reviewers. They have provided the comments, and though they like your paper, but then they have asked questions. They want you to change a few things based on what is you would like to change those, and this is called rebuttals. So what you need to do is to prepare a rebuttal document in which you need to answer point by point editors' comments and queries, that how you're addressing comments. And some of the tips is just to be to the point. Don't issues which are not asked by the editors or the reviewers, and just stick to the point when you're answering a query. Don't go here and there. Another important thing which you need to understand, that it's not personal. Take it objective opinion, okay? So it's not personal. They're just making a comment on your paper. So this is not about you per se or about your personality. This is about the paper or the work you have submitted. So don't take it personal. And again, at the end of the day, publishing is a long process. Be patient, be concise, and be polite if possible to the editors, and never be rude when you send an email to the editor. Though when you're writing rebuttals, when you find that there are some of the things which they're asking are basically you think it's not correct, then say it politely that you think that one of the things which reviewers is sort of raised, it doesn't seem to be on merit. So you would like rebutters, the editors, most of the time they are volunteer people. They have full-time jobs as an academics. They are not being paid for the work they are doing. Okay, so if you are patient with them, if you are good, then of course they will appreciate your patience in this regard. Next, please. So how many papers you should publish from your research if you are a master's student or a PhD student? So there is no hard and fast rule about it, but most people say that from your master's, 1 or 2 paper, maybe 1 paper on your research article, and another paper if you have done a good review, then a good review article. If you have done a PhD research, again, I would say that I would go for more quality of the work rather than quantity of the work. So for example, it's good to publish 1 good paper in a high impact journal, like 16, 17 impact factor, rather than publishing 5 or 6 papers in the low impact journals. So quantity versus quality game, you don't artificially try to bifurcate your data. Try to have the, the article which deems seem fit in a certain category. So 3 to 4 papers from your PhD research and 1 to 2 good papers from your master's research. Most of the time, that's a good plan to go through. Next, please. Another thing which I would like to just touch base here a little bit is the reviewer. If you would like to review a paper and act as a reviewer of a journal, it's certainly a good thing to do. It gives you the exposure to the field. It also for example, if you're preparing your own research, then of course it gives you an idea of what are the things, how the papers are submitted. Excuse me. What are the things which people do when they submit a paper, how the peer review process works, how the editorial process works, and how the editors actually work and decide on a paper. So it gives you a very good understanding about the whole peer review process if you actually volunteer yourself as a reviewer. And then nowadays, you also get credit. So some journals would add into your publons, and there are different sort of metrics they have, and then you can show it to you if you're working as a researcher, academic. Sometime in your annual performance review as well, you can show that you have reviewed so many papers in a year. So it's definitely an experience, which is a good experience to go through. Next, please. Impact factor is another important thing to consider. It shows the relative importance of a journal. So for example, higher the impact factor of a journal is, it's considered more prestigious. It's calculated on the basis of yearly average number of citations of a paper in a journal. And normally with the general medical journals, the impact factors are high. For example, Nature or Lancet, and the reason behind, because a lot of people do read those journals, a large number of people. So then it actually happens, then it gets the more citation, it gets the exposure and to have more citations. Unfortunately, in pharmacy, many journals are very good and prestigious, but their impact factor are low, or they have no impact factor. And the reason behind, because the readership is really small. It's not that it's nothing wrong with the journal itself, but our readership as a pharmacist, for example, in pharmacy practice, there are many good journals, but the impact factors are really low. And as I said, because the pharmacy is a small community and less people do read and cite. For example, if you compare that with the biology journal, you would have hundreds and thousands of biology academics who would be reading those journals and citing it. Or even if you compare that with the medical journals, more people would be reading on those. And I know a couple of pharmacy education journals, which are very good journals. They do publish good stuff, but they don't have impact factor, because that's again a small field where you have less number of journals. Next, please. So the examples of medical journals could be Lancet, PLOS Medicine, JAMA, which is Journal of American Medical Association, BMJ, New England Journal of Medicine. And sometime you can publish your pharmacy-related studies or medicines-related studies in these journals as well. You don't really have to go to pharmacy journals to go through, but they will give you more coverage and exposure. Again, your study needs to be at that level where it actually attracts a broader readership and broader coverage. So if you have a very small pharmacy issue in the country, then of course they wouldn't take. But if you're talking about a broad scale issue related to medicines and pharmacy in your country, then of course they would be interested to take on board. Next. These are some of the examples of pharmacy journals which you may be aware of: Journal of Pharmaceutical Policy and Practice, RSAP, IJCP, International Journal of Pharmacy Practice, Annals of Pharmacotherapy. Again, it's not an exhaustive list. I just put in some pharmacy journals as well. Next, please. This is my own journal. It's called Journal of Pharmaceutical Policy and Practice. It was started in 2008, running it for 12 odd years now. It emphasizes on pharmaceutical policy. It's indexed in Scopus and PubMed. It's an open access journal, and you're most welcome to actually submit your articles in there if you like. So that's basically the sort of end of my presentation, but I just want to add one more thing before I sort of conclude, because somebody asked me a question about writing book chapters versus writing articles. So writing book chapters is different from writing articles, because most of the time you can write a book chapter building on one case study, original research case study, which is equally fine. Most of the time we are writing book chapters which are on the synthesis and review of literature. So you back it up with references and resources. So I would ideally place the book chapters in the range of 5,000 to 6,000 words of nicely written thing on a topic. Again, it requires a lot of expertise, experience to write a book chapter. So, and writing something which is useful, which is beneficial for the people, it requires a lot of experience, it requires a lot of patience and hard work. Then only you can produce something which is of good quality. So I would conclude here at the moment. So I've taken 40 odd minutes, and I would welcome if people have any questions here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zahiruddin Baba, for your time. The session was very informative and rich in context, especially the take-home message that the newness is what matters. There were quite some learning points to grab. We will now move towards the question answer session. And the first question that I have received is by Mr. Hassan Ali. He asks that at undergraduate level, how can I participate in research studies?
I think this is a very broad question. Whatever you want to do, I think my answer is that to find a mentor and the support. So don't do this without an experienced researcher. If there is nobody there to guide you, then I would say this process is very, very difficult. So finding a mentor and a researcher who can guide you at the undergraduate process is the first step. Who would be your supervisor at undergraduate level? Of course, I cannot answer that.
The next question is from Dr. Zafar. He wants to ask that, is there any guideline from journals about letters to editors and viewpoints?
Absolutely. Every journal has its own guidelines. And what I've covered today is more of generic in nature, so they can give you the exact number of words and exact number of references. Like some journals would say that if you're writing a letter, you cannot have more than 5 references or 8 references. So again, if you go to the journal website and look for instruction for authors in that specific journal, they would provide you the exact guidance on that.
Mr. Majid wants to ask if Science Citation Index or Science Citation Index Expanded would be considered in journal selection.
Definitely, it can be considered, but again, it depends on the institution where you're working, because every institution is different, and most institutions would consider Scopus index journals and citations, but again, it varies from one to another. And one example I can give you is that some countries place a lot of importance on the H index of a researcher. So the higher the index of a researcher is, basically, you would consider it's more productive a researcher is. But in England, they would place a lot of importance on actually reading the article, your article, and then placing it. Rather than saying that you have published an article with 20 impact factor journal, they would actually read your article in different evaluation exercise and would see that whether how much, I mean, whether how good the article is, whether you really have done a good job, what is the impact of this article, basically, how the methodology is being taken care of, what are the sort of, how the objectives been written, how the methods been written, and what is the impact of this overall this paper, rather than just looking at the impact factor of the journal. So it very much depends on the policy of the university where you're working and the policy of the country. There is no standard answer to that. Different universities, they employ different criteria. And as I said, in United Kingdom here, we have a research excellence framework exercise in which they evaluate research papers, where they don't only consider that you have published an article in 20 impact factor journal, so you're excellent. No, they would actually read your article and see whether your methodology is good, your objectives are good, and what is the real impact of your paper.
Okay, thank you. Doctor, there's this person, Nadeem Zia, who wants to ask that how research can improve in low-income countries.
Thank you very much. I think, again, the research in low-income countries, it's a publishing and editing is even difficult in high-income countries because there is less mentorship and support. So I think there is a need to invest a lot in low-income countries on having these courses, having these mentorship to junior and young researchers, and actually giving them an idea that writing and editing and publishing is a field in itself. This is not something which you can just do it as you're going along. You need proper training, and it requires a lot of sort of, mental, what's called organization, I would say, that specifying some amount of time every day or in a month on that. So this is not that if you spend few hours, you would grasp that. So I think giving the researchers an understanding that this is a proper field which you need to learn if you really want to do a good job. So seminars around that, seminars on editing, seminars on publishing, seminars on one step behind, which is on research methodologies, topic selection. How would you select good topics? If you're an early career or a middle career researcher, what are the good topics you want to do in your country? Because I think that's the first step. Editing and publishing is the third, fourth, fifth, sixth step. The first step in the research process is the selection of a topic, and then you go on that. So sometimes we do select a topic, which is not a very good topic. You spend 3 years of your time, and you actually want to publish that, the journals wouldn't accept because it has no value. So I think you need to go back to the first step and spend a lot of time on the first step, which is selection of the research topic, putting a lot of emphasis on that, what you really want to do, and whether in 3 years down the road, when you have your results, would the journal be interested in your work? And of course, as a researcher, you cannot do that if you have an experienced supervisor. He or she can tell you whether after 3 years you will be able to publish it, or after 2 years you will be able to publish it. So I think the guidance is needed from the very first step. So the guidance on topic selection, on methodology, editing, and publishing. So the 4-stage criteria, that's what is needed in developing countries.
Great. Someone wants to ask that can undergraduates publish their review articles independently without involving a supervisor? And do journals look for the background of the author?
Um, Again, this is a question which is related to the institutional policies of the university. Technically, you can, because many universities do allow that if somebody is having a master's or PhD thesis, and even if you don't get consent of your supervisor, you can submit that. I'm not saying that you should do that, but technically speaking, you can do that. For example, in UK, if you want to submit your thesis without even your supervisor approval, you can do that. But you shouldn't be doing that, but technically you can. So again, if you have a paper which you don't want to involve your supervisor, you may have solid reasons for not involving, but I think ethically informing them is a good thing and getting a guidance and approach. But if you think that because you have done most of the work, 90 to 95%, and you don't really need their guidance, then of course nobody can stop you from doing that. And whether journal editors look at the author's background, this is again a very, I would say, a tricky question. Yes, they do look at the background of the honest answer to that is yes. They do look at the author's background, but again, everything which we published is not based on author's background. So sometimes we do publish very good papers, which the author is an unknown author and it's first time publishing. I do encourage and support a lot of new researchers who have not published before, who have not published a single article before. And I have given a lot of chances. I think 50 to 60% of our researchers who have published in my journal or other journals, they were first timers. So yes, we do look at the background as well, but if you have a good paper, then of course you're most welcome. And that's not a hindrance, stop you from actually submitting and publishing the paper.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Zahir. Let me see if we have more questions. Uh, Bilkis wants to ask how to find journal that is suitable according to her work. What should be the approach?
I think the best thing would be to go to maybe Science Direct or Scopus and actually put some keywords there and see what are the journals which are publishing the criteria. Even if you go to ScienceWell, which is a science evaluation analytics, which is more of a high-end software, and not many people would have that idea. But actually, they can pinpoint what are the top cited article in that field. Even they can give you the name of the journals as well. But if you're a new researcher, just going to Scopus and Science Direct and putting your keywords there would give you the list of journals where actually similar studies are being published in that area. And again, my advice would be always get a mentor, always get a supervisor, a good supervisor, because he or she can guide you in the process.
Mr. Majid wants to ask, that please suggest some boundaries of pharmacists in practice-based research.
Can you ask him to clarify it a bit? What boundaries? I mean, ethical boundaries, or what boundaries? Is it more?
Okay, since he hasn't really mentioned that, we can move on to the question from Rubab Hussain. She wants to ask, what is the procedure for publishing a paper in your journal of pharmaceutical policy and practice?
Procedure is that you have to go through the instruction for authors, and then basically you submit your paper with a cover letter, and the detailed instruction for authors are listed. I just want to take a question here because Dr. Noman Aziz asked a question. What could be more appropriate reflection of impact or quality of a journal other than impact factor, as it's not always true? So the appropriate reflection is, for example, the impact of a research study could be, there could be a change in practice. So that could be one of the things, or change in a policy, or change in patient health outcomes. Okay, so I think that's a better reflection of the quality of work rather than just saying, quality. For example, we published studies a few years ago in our journal on pricing in Thailand. So it was a research article which we published on drug prices in Thailand and shows the prices were really high. So the article went to the Thailand Minister of Health or Vietnam's Minister of Health. And as a result of that, the Vietnam changed their pricing policy just on the basis of one article. So the journal we have doesn't have an impact factor, but the article we published has an impact. And the impact was that the country's president or vice president changed the pricing policy of the country. So actually improve access for millions of people. So these are the examples of impact, real impact. So the publishing a journal article doesn't mean that you publish it and then you get promotion. Publishing an article means that it's really used in practice, that you change a practice, you change a policy. For example, developing a new medication adherence algorithm or a nomogram or something like that, which could actually improve patient medication adherence or patient counseling. So something like that. So these are the real studies where you could really see the difference in real terms.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll just quickly move on to the last question from today since we are short on time. As Seher Gul wants to ask that, as you know, that we don't have research options which are included in our courses, how can students from Pakistan have originality in their topics, in their new methodology, new research questions? How can they do that?
Again, I think this is a very, very broad question. And I have the only thing which I can advise you is basically is to look for good supervisors, because I think that's the appropriate way to go. And look for good supervisors, number one. And number two, if you're reading something, try to read from good journals, from high-end journals. Okay, so that would be my advice. Go for Lancet, go for PLOS Medicine, go for journals which are really publishing good stuff, rather than to go for journals which may not be so useful. So trying to find a good mentor, good supervisor, and reading good stuff, these are the two options and suggestions I have.
Great. With this, I would first of all thank you, Dr. Zahiruddin Babar, for your time. I would also request all the participants if they can please switch their video on and if we can take a collective picture before we end the meeting.
Thank you so much, Amal, for hosting, and thanks everyone for joining. It gives me real pleasure to talk to all of you today.
So Dr. Hamayel, if you allow me, can I say something? Because
Yes,
we
yes,
have
sure.
four different screens to go through. So just please hang on. As we take the screen number one, we will say we're done on screen one, okay? And of course, if you don't want to, that's absolutely your call. So Tanzil Zafar, Amjad Shaukat, we're waiting for you. So we can move on to screen number two. Okay, we won't keep everybody here. So when one screen is done, going on to page number 2 of 3. A lot of people do not have their videos on. I mean, so if you wanted to, that would be the chance. Okay, it's all right. Okay, from my side, I'm done with the pictures. I'll just share a screen while you're closing, Dr. Hamayel.
All right.
Go ahead. You can close the session. Go ahead, Dr. Hamayel.
All right. So with this, we're going to close the session, and we're going to also just quickly go through these pictures as he displays this. Thank you so much for your time, everybody, especially Dr. Zahiruddin Babar, Your session was very informative. We look forward for more sessions where we can get together and learn more things about pharmacy to refine this profession. Thank you very much.